very, very excited to be talking to you both. I have been thinking so much about the film, and its imagery is something that like you can't really get out of your mind, but it's not even just the imagery, it's also the writing and just Mohamad, you sharing your insides the way that you did, and your family allowing this space to be so vulnerable on camera. Like it's such an honor to be talking to you. And I really enjoyed you and Jimmy's collaboration. So thank you for letting me do this.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, that's very kind. Thank you. I'm so happy that the film resonated with you. Honestly, it's I'm really honored.
Oh my gosh! I mean, it was so gorgeous. How long did the entire production take?
I mean, it was a process getting it set up, and I can definitely speak to that. But the actual production itself we came to Connecticut in November, and then I saw Mohamad on that Skype call with his mom, and we're like, oh, he's going to Lebanon to visit her in January. Let's see how to figure that out. So really just November to January was actually the filming portion of it. But
love that. Wow.
Yeah. The setting up.
Post, it's like everything. Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
And
of course. That's wild. Well, I'd love to hear from you, Mohamad, and how you are currently defining what a home is.
How much time do you have?
Especially now, I think, too, because, so many people, it's interesting with your story specifically, finding out about the quote travel ban that wasn't called a travel ban at the time,
right,
when you were already here. It felt like that resonated, I think, and probably resonated with so many viewers of, when COVID hit and like taking a pause and being like, where in the world am I right now? Am I going to be able to go anywhere else? And so many people had to learn how to call new places home because we had to confine ourselves, and obviously under different circumstances, but just that notion of having to create home in any space that you are. I'd love to hear you speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, that the understanding of home, I think, shifts and changes as our life experiences change. So home to me 10 years ago was much different than home today. I won't go through the different stages of home to me, but I think what life had taught me through the many ups and downs that I went through, in particular with the Syrian war and the aftermath of it, and my parents leaving, and now we're trying to grapple with that new reality, is rather, I find it that home is where peace and tranquility is. I dug deeper into my Sufi roots, and مكانك حيث أقامك. Your place, your home, is where he has established you. And when you understand مكانك حيث أقامك, in that sense, then home becomes more of a very nostalgic, romantic memory. But I cherish the presence more than the past. I no longer long to something that might not be existent, especially speaking in today's Damascus. A lot of people say, why don't you go visit? You haven't been there since a decade ago. Don't you want to go see it? I say, no, I don't want to ruin the beautiful memories that I have frozen in my brain. I don't want to see something that overwrites this. I don't want to see something that I don't want to see. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, because so much has changed. We all know it. I know it. I feel it. People have changed. Architecture has changed, but primarily societies have shifted. So that's home to me. If you're talking about home, Syrian home. It's that frozen, nostalgic, romantic idea of what it used to be. If you're talking about, but present home is the United States, is where we embrace our vulnerability, embrace our sadness, but also build on it to build something positive. We are not people of despair. So we embrace vulnerability, take it in, think about it for a long time, and move on and rebuild. And I am rebuilding in the diaspora. I don't need to be there on the ground to rebuild. This film is a fantastic example how you rebuild ideas and how you change people's perceptions, especially about these topics that we're talking about. And it's very timely, and I couldn't think of a better time for this film to come out.
Yeah, I mean, you you couldn't have asked for a better time, and we couldn't have asked for a better time to be viewing the film and to really hear your story in regard to that. And I think the perspective is what really sets it apart from your average story of war, especially connecting humanity to the architecture around us. I always find architects so fascinating because they are designers, they are artists, they are builders. But most people, on average, when you think of architecture, you're thinking of construction, you're thinking of, um, taking up space for capitalism and to commodify things. And something that you said that I verbally reacted to in the film was that the news is not showing what's being lost culturally. And there's something to weep over when 1,000-year-old minaret is bombed out of existence. And I, I like feel myself tearing up at that line now because, you know, as someone who is a first generation American. My parents were immigrants here, and I've only been back to Libya, where my family is from, twice. And both times was before our war.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the idea of the country holding story and holding meaning and holding art for thousands of years doesn't even register in our brains because the only image that we are bombarded with is the one of everything coming down. Like we've seen buildings being flattened completely. And when you see that, like our gut reaction is, I hope there are not people in that building. I hope there are not people in around it. I mean, we lost 6 of our family members when Reagan bombed a civilian building in Libya in the 80s. And I was actually looking through photos of this building with my grandmother a couple of weeks ago, and then flipping through the photos of the people like in our family who used to live in it, and them in like their suits and their hair slicked back and the big smiles and the cigarettes. And it's like we forget that there are roots to these buildings. Like there are roots beneath the ground that have kept people um, alive and safe and home. And these homes are places where others were always welcomed. Like and now after watching it, I'm processing, like seeing not only the loss of home, but the loss of pieces of our culture, and being able to extend pieces of our culture like hospitality, like hosting people, like the pride that we have around the minarets or the mosques or whatever it is that we had, that we're like, that's Syrian, that's Libyan, that's all of these things. And you have been able to preserve that by creating these miniatures and um, in such detail. You consistently talked about the layers, and I would love to know what creating those layers released from you as you were creating these replicas to process the trauma of your own experience.
It was really such a cathartic work. The process in itself was very therapeutic. And in a way, my subconscious was trying to busy myself up with all of these layers
Totally.
and details, and to sort of not focus on the present, but really just dive into these details. And just like a heavily traumatized person that is sculpting something and just going at it, like, hey, relax. But I had nobody to say relax. So I had with these pieces one-on-one to just go at it late at night with beautiful oud music on a very sad tone, and I just clicked in my bubble. I had a very tight bubble. I miss that bubble very much, but
What did you access? Like when you're in that moment and you're it's almost like your higher consciousness just takes over and you don't even know what it is that's coming out of you and you're creating. What did you tap into that you hold on to until
so
now?
you will appreciate my process. I begin with looking at photos from Syria and from my childhood on my iPad, and I pull all of that visual information and the memories and the memories and the memories and the memories. And I look at architecture, and I look at how life used to be, and I look at videos and audio, and I start playing Hamza Shakur, a Sufi singer, with the very sad oud and nai, and behind me there's a water fountain trickling, reminding me of the water fountain in Damascus, and I burn oud,
Love
bakhur,
that.
to
Yes.
fill the air of my little studio with the essence. And before you know it, the sound of the trickling water, the oud, Hamza Shakur going, La ilaha illallah, and you are just now in a trance. Yeah, when you click into that mood, I believe me, I'm no longer on
Yeah.
on ground. I am in this ethereal, romantic, nostalgic mode. Now, alhamdulillah, I am blessed to have the ability to 3D print those emotions into sculptures, right? Other people create poetry, other people create music, other people create so on. My tool was like these sculptures. So I tell people, if there's a 3D printer that prints emotions, they would print you. And there's no way for any artist to take full credit
Yeah.
of the process, because it's all so made on the spot and very, very liquid, very organic.
Wow, mashallah. Jimmy, how did you hear about Muhammad and his story?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a long, circuitous route towards this coming together. But basically, I was working on a TV show for Apple Plus called Home, and that was the series explores architects and the way that they thematically explore the notion of home in their work. And Muhammad was discovered by our researchers as part of that process. And I mean, my wife is from Pakistan. At that time, we're talking like 2017, right? That was a moment in time where a story like Muhammad, something that I think is humanizing of the Muslim experience in America, there was definitely like a deficit of those types of stories being told on TV, still are. And we were all seeing this as our star episode of the season. And an executive at Apple actually rejected it because they didn't, Muhammad doesn't live in a mansion. Seriously. Like you couldn't sell an Apple home product against his house, I guess. And therefore they didn't think the story was worth going forward. And so around that time, I like by pure serendipity, I guess, had found Congressman Dick Gephardt, who, had basically he was just apoplectic about the state of immigration in the country. I mean, he was just horrified at the way that the previous administration was talking about our immigrant and refugee communities. And he was looking for stories that he could fund, frankly, that would serve as a corrective to the way that these stories, that our most marginalized communities were being spoken about in the media. And so I had this story with Muhammad, and I called Muhammad and I said, if I can find a way to tell your story independently of Apple, independently of a streamer, would you still work with me? Would you trust me? And I don't know. I mean, thankfully he agreed. I hope he still thinks that was a good idea, but that's how it came together. No, shaking his head.
Wow.
Apple executive is gonna hunt you one day down while you watch.
I mean, no, I'm
Okay.
sure he's kicking himself because this was, I mean, I have never, this, I'm familiar with that series, and this film is some like evokes home in such a different way. Like I've never seen it told this way. And I mean, up until you worked on this film, Jimmy and Mohammed, what was your perspective on the visual storytelling of the Syrian war until you decided to tell it this way? Because you told it in a very specific way. I mean, yes, we saw architecture come down, but we were spared the visuals that rip our hearts out continuously, of people who are in their trauma in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to it, I guess, first, Mohammed, if that's okay. But my wife, as I mentioned, is from Pakistan, and around 2017, actually, she'd been diagnosed with complex PTSD, and some of that was because of her time working as a conflict reporter back in Karachi, where she was consistently being asked to not focus on the music culture of Pakistan or the food culture. It was always like, show us your most grotesque stories. That's what
Of
HBO
course. Yep.
wanted. That's what BBC wanted. So it was re-traumatizing, and frankly, it was breaking her. And as with me as her partner, it was breaking me. And so I was becoming very conscious of what this violence in our media culture was doing to us, and so when I was watching the images coming out of the Syrian war, it was horrifying. And the thing is that what I think happens in the American media system is that we disassociate. We live in this state of disassociation. And then we are completely unaware of anything that's going around except the thing that we focus on intensely for this really concentrated zeitgeist. And then it's traumatic, it's violent, it's horrifying. We can't look away. And then we burn out, and then we move on to the next story. And so, I've just seen it happen again and again and again. We just witnessed it happen with Afghanistan. So it's something for me that I take really seriously, which is like, how can we find different entry points that are not about using violence so that we can tell a story in a different way? And I thought that Mohammed's work speaks to that so beautifully. So I obviously want you to speak to it as well, Mohammed.
I was always, aware of the propaganda and the media and the way it frames our region and our people. What I underestimated is how effective that tool was in the hands of some politicians. And I was quite shocked after the previous election in 2016 to see, like, wait a second. I understand there's the propaganda, but I didn't realize how many people drank up the Kool-Aid, and how many people thought that the folks of the Middle East are so dispensable, or their story at least. So it gave me this huge push to say, okay, I came out of my cocoon and I wanted to share my life and my story. Up until then, in 2015, I had kept my art practice as a secret.
Why?
It was just a personal therapeutic process to deal with the traumas that I had, and give me a pressure valve to deflate and go back to my architectural career that was very demanding, and 80-hour weeks and traveling. And of course, I was clean shaven, Mohammed, and nice suits, and designing working on very big projects at the time. So most people probably thought I was Italian. So when I got to that point where, like, okay, I will show you my other skin, not my real skin, but my other skin. I'm also Mohammed, raised in Saudi Arabia, Muslim, born in Damascus. I am Syrian. My sisters have been refugee. We are immigrants, but my father is a retired surgeon, and this is our life, how it used to be. And we're not an anomaly. We're middle class family, very much like millions of people in the Middle East. And that's what we lost. That's what I lost, and I personally lost. I can speak to my story, and I can't speak to on behalf of millions, but my story is such normal Joe that I hoped that that sincerity and embracing the vulnerability and opening up, that kindness would be perceived without borders. Authenticity can be understood without translators. And art, to me, was always the key into people's hearts. It's the storytelling that comes after people say, "Who the heck is this guy?" That's what Jimmy did. That he brought the full picture of, okay, he doesn't only make detailed miniature, and he's not a horror, but he's a human being with a life and a past and a present, and this is his story. So a lot of people can relate to this, and you'll be surprised how many people have reached to both of us, not necessarily from the Middle East, but this story repeats itself so much because it's very human. The history of humans is full of nostalgia, leaving home, and so on. It's just amazing to me how societies tend to forget, and they are able to paint people with large brush strokes and say immigrants, refugees are danger, they're terrorists, they don't have established lives, they come from nowhere, they're going to come take our money and wealth, and all of that propaganda. It shocked me that that propaganda was that effective.
Yeah. I also find it incredibly beautiful that the focus was the art and the oratory storytelling, since those two things are actually really big parts of Syrian culture, of Arab culture, even Muslim culture, where there's a very specific way we approach storytelling. And it's like how we learn about our families, how we pass it down. And that's never actually highlighted in the your typical representation around Arab people. And the way you spoke specifically, like, it was very clear that you trusted the person behind the camera, and that there was this deep trust between you and Jimmy. I would love to know, Mohamad, how Jimmy built this trust with you, and Jimmy, how you intentionally built this trust with Mohamad, because I think it's very important for people, especially when telling the story or guiding or directing the story of a community that you are not a part of yourself. There are some steps that need to be taken, and it was very clear that you took them. And then oftentimes when we watch films, we can tell when those steps are not taken. So what was that like for you, Mohamad? And then I'd love to hear from you, Jimmy.
It's a very simple answer. I'm a person that follows his intuition. I trust my intuition quite a lot, and alhamdulillah, and when I meet a person, I can tell if I like him or I like him or not. Bad intentions take a lot of work to niyyah. The intentions take a lot of manicuring to hide. You can smell it from kilometers.
100%, totally.
100%. And Jimmy was very honest, very open with me. There was like no gimmicks, no hidden, and we had a common denominator. We had a common agenda, and it wasn't like, hey, look, we're going to throw in a can of Pepsi in there just for advertising. Like, no. This is the way I want it. It's tell the story, no extra drama, no bullschlachen, no blood, no people in pickups going, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. And and that's, I put it out there. I didn't manicure anything in my life to Jimmy. In fact, when he recorded, I'm sorry to say this, Jimmy, but you know, I, I didn't notice the cameraman. They weren't
That's
there.
the best compliment you can give. That is the best
Right.
compliment you can give a director.
Yeah.
We were like, I was at such an ease with them, They're like, okay, I'm gonna go meet my mom, have a beautiful lunch. You guys tag along. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Yeah, and your mom was such a great sport too, mashallah. Like she really, I mean, it's hard to like. I hope that whoever's listening to this, whoever's watching this knows like it is not common or easy for there to be a camera put into these situations that are so intimate, especially within like a culture that intimacy is a beautiful thing and it's kept private most of the time. And
I'll tell
like
you
these.
something.
Mhm.
It goes to the point person. Our societies in the Muslim world in general are very hospitable. We are very used to strangers in our arms. Ahlan wa sahlan, right?
Ahlan wa sahlan.
Now,
Yes. Yeah.
there's some of us that will freak out to say camera, but some of us is like, it's another tool. It's a phone or a camera, no matter, but he's a dayf. Ahla wa sahla, right? And that goes to say, I work with a lot of refugees and to build artwork about their lives as well. The same happened. We were sat down with tea and coffee, and they welcomed us with open hearts. So it's not only Mohammed, it's everybody that from the region, open arms. Ahlan wa sahlan. We have nothing to be afraid of. We have nothing to hide. We are what you see.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that reminder. That's really, really special to hear. Jimmy, what were your insecurities and fears as you went in knowing that you were going to be given this kind of access, and what did you do to make sure that the trust was maintained?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't take it for granted, like you can't take it for granted that like someone agrees to film with you and therefore they can just open up their life to you. Like trust has to be earned at literally every single step of the production, all the way through.
Yeah.
There's no point at which that is not a sort of bond that you're holding with your subject. And so I take that kind of covenant really seriously. And yeah, I mean, with Mohammed, I tried as much as possible, and I think he was speaking to it, to just be transparent. Like I'm not worried about saying like these are my intentions coming in. This is my predisposition of what I think your story is, and I'm open to seeing what unfolds. I mean, shooting in Lebanon, shooting that reunion with his mother, that was never part of our original intention of what we wanted to film. It was just an open-mindedness to see what unfolded and to allow Mohammed to show us as much truth as he was willing to. And I think that like there's this idea in documentary that like, oh, if you ask the right question or if you trick your subject, that like somehow you'll unearth the right thing. And I just think I think it's really extractive. I think it's really exploitative. And for me, like what I focus on a lot more is just like the type of feeling that I bring into a space. And like, it's these weird sort of things that are ineffable or inexplicable, where it's like I was going through a lot with my family at the time at which I was filming. Like I had eloped with my wife because I wasn't getting the support of my progressive Jewish family. And like, we couldn't figure out how to have a wedding in a way that felt comfortable. So like, there was a lot of discord and a lot of ways in which I was sort of feeling disconnected from my family, specifically around the way that they were viewing my Muslim wife. And so like, all of this was happening, swirling in my mind. And I just think that like, I don't know, it's like a dialectic. Like, Mohammed is such a beautiful artist. I see myself as an artist. And I thought that like, if I just bring my presence into the space, something really interesting will unfold in the sort of connection between the two of us. And that's how I tried to approach it,
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. How has this experience redefined home for you?
Oh, yeah, I know. When you asked Mohammed that, I was like, wow, I don't know if I have the ability to fully grasp that right now. I mean, I really do believe that home is something that we are creating in every moment. It's something that it's not, of course I share these nostalgic ideas. Like I've looked at my work going back, through my sort of films that I made prior to this, and clearly I have an obsession with this idea of like home being taken away. And I think that like I have the memories of my childhood with my family, and the good and the bad and the beauty of what they exposed me to, which I think has made me who I am to this day. But home is here in Altadena, California, with my wife and with my dog and what we're creating, and the community that we're constantly trying to, to find people who can see you and accept you, and you see them and accept them, and it's space. So yeah, it's a complex question. I don't know if I fully know yet.
Yeah, and that's also a perfect answer, because I asked that question and I am also in the process of redefining it. And I think that being in process of redefining what home is one of the intentions that was very clear in the film. Is you're telling us that we have to be mindful of recognizing that home is actually evolving as we are evolving, and it's not guaranteed. Like, the safety that you experience today is not promised to you tomorrow, and millions and millions of people experience that every day. And this was an amazing reminder to us that there's no reason that wouldn't, like, that might not happen to us. Like, this was not something that
Yeah.
Syrians expected, that Libyans, like, that so many people around the world expected, until it happens. And then we're like, oh.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. I connect with that so much, because I think like something I've been thinking about a lot is like I make these kind of films. Like I work with people like Mohamad because like I want to learn from him. I want to see how he's had to adapt and be resilient, right? Because we live in this time which is very tenuous, very tenuous. Like I think our fears of like societal collapse and lack of trust in our democracies, and the way that the climate is going to impact our future, it creates this very sort of scary miasma around like whether we feel safe, right? And I think that like to me it's such lunacy, like actual lunacy, that we build walls against refugees and try to keep them out, because there's such intelligence that we're denying ourselves, because that has been their reality. Societal collapse, democracies failing, like the way that climate has impacted all these things is their reality, and they've had to adapt, and they've had to be resilient, and we're not exposing ourselves to that intelligence as a culture. We're shutting ourselves off from it. And what like an incredible loss.
I totally resonate with that, and I agree with that so deeply. It doesn't make sense, because especially I think as Americans, when our pride is the story, and within that story is the abundance of perspective. But we're finding out as we peel back the layers that we are very particular about which perspectives we put to the forefront, which perspectives we amplify, and how that serves the greater story that we have in place. But what if that story isn't serving us anymore? And what if we need to evolve from that story in order to evolve as a society, which is what everybody wants? And I will also say it's not people who come to America as refugees, that it's not their responsibility to fix us. It is our responsibility to be the safe haven that we promise to be. And in that experience of being of service is where we learn and grow. And then obviously, naturally, people want to be a part of society and contribute in so many miraculous ways. Like, that would not be possible had they not gone through their experiences. Like Mohamad, you would not have been able to access that part of you had you not gone through what you've been through. Had you not experienced the grief that you had gone through, because it's like it is direct access to the above. And when we're able to tap into that, you see the rest of the world so much clearer. And more importantly, you see yourself so much clearer. You are more accepting of yourself, which is what so many of us are struggling with today. When it comes to these stories, how do we work to preserve them, whether it be through art, whether it be through service, whether it be through films? How do we as consumers of the art and the culture work to preserve it? And then how do we work with institutions who are rooted in storytelling to support this preservation?
Mohamad, do you want me to take that? Yeah, I mean, prior to making this film, like years ago, I made a documentary in India called Tomorrow We Disappear. And it was about the Kathputli colony in New Delhi, which is where all the magicians, acrobats, and puppeteers lived. It was 2,800 artist families that were all being displaced in order to build New Delhi's first skyscraper. And it was something that I sort of learned in that process of making that film. There was an idea in like Hindu mythology, which was that, every act of creation is also an act of destruction. And therefore we have to be very mindful about what we want to create in this world, because you have to be very aware of dualistically what you're giving up. And so for me, it's like my nightmare in some respects is being like a chronicler of lost cultures, because I want to figure out how we can keep culture alive. I want to figure out how we can live in a syncretic world, right? And so a lot of what I'm trying to do is just be like, this is beautiful and this is meaningful and it should exist, not like, let's lament it now that it's gone, right? And it just is happening more and more and more in this world. And so like my sort of like spiritual dedication is to just be like a little force that's trying to forestall this giant tidal wave as much as I can. So I can only really speak to that, right? Mohamad, I would be curious on your point of view on how you sort of see these things being preserved, and how Syria, the Syria of your heart can kind of live on.
Yeah.
Oh, what a question. I'm going to focus on the responsibility of people like me, first generation immigrants in the diaspora, to answer your question. Because we also have our own responsibility to build a common denominator with everybody else. Your approach as a born and raised American would differ from an approach from somebody born and raised in the Middle East. And I say that because we come, for somebody like me that came here as an adult, I've already established my character, I've already established my personality to a certain extreme. I invested in relationships and friendships with people outside of my circles. Mm-hmm. That is a huge mistake that most of our folks fail to do. And it's not only Arabs, it's a lot of immigrants. It's ideally, human nature. This fly is going to be more famous than the vice president fly.
That's hilarious.
Spanish flies are very
whole breed.
Yes, like I'm gonna get you. It's okay. Anyway, I'm so sorry about that. But
don't be sorry.
The human instinct when they come to a new place where they don't know the language or they don't know people is to cocoon in with people, similar people, and that's it. And of course, if there's a crazy politician or a crazy group that is painting that particular group of people a very negative image, it even increases that the very natural thing to do is to hide and cocoon and even dig yourself deeper. And Muhammad goes by Mo, and Ahmed go by Joe, and hijab comes up, and so on. So I fully understand the challenge, but my message is to the first and second generation. immigrants in the United States or in the West in general, that first of all, you need to fully believe in your roots. Like Mahmoud Darwish said, على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. He was talking about Palestine. On this earth, there is what deserves to fight for and to live for, you know? So we have to educate our youth that grew up not knowing anything but war and destruction, that you come from a gold presence, you come from history, you come from substance. That's one. فاقد الشيء لا يعطيه. If you don't have something, you can't provide it. So we need to fill ourselves with love of our roots, know our story well, and then invest in relationships. Invest. How many of us are working, breathing with so many people around us, yet they don't know that some of us are Muslim, some of us are actually half Syrian, some of us are immigrants, you know, and rightfully so in this very xenophobic climate. It is really not only up to the artists and the videographers and the directors. It's really such a big task at this moment that it is a very group work. It starts from this very small neighborhoods and the local mosques and the local churches up to, you know, the upper echelon where people like Jimmy come, and then now you have an ability to speak to our global audience. But before we reach the global audience, we have to speak to the normal Joe that might never see a broken home, you know, or refuses to watch a broken home because it's about a Muslim American. Oh, I don't want to watch it. How do we break that barrier? How do we break these invisible walls? It's something that we really have to invest in. And it's very simple, very simple. Humans can read and understand kindness and hospitality and peace and authenticity without translation. That comes through. So we have to open up more. And especially I put a lot of emphasis on immigrants in the United States because this is our responsibility. In particular, if you come from countries that are now no longer existent, like Syria and Libya and Iraq, why have we been saved? Why have we been spared? What is our duty for the people that have suffered and have lost somebody? How can we live a full life in the West? I can't turn to God one day and say, well, I had a nice 401k and a nice house and a nice car. It had air conditioning. No. If he says, I buried half of your country, what have you done for your country? Then there needs to be a greater goal without diving too much into, you know, da'wah mode. But
Yeah.
this is really, I really see it as clear as that.
Jimmy, what do you believe institutions that are rooted in storytelling should be doing today as we continue to redefine home, as we continue to redefine story, as more like the more narrative-led stories are being told directly from the person who's actually experienced them?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think the movement in that direction of people having more agency over their own story is beautiful and correct. Like, I think that is the route that we need to go towards. And I think that, look, I mean, in some respects, some of these institutions probably need to come down in some respects because the roots are so rotten, you know. It's it's this hard thing that I'm always trying to balance out in my life, which is like, do I want to try to be part of the reformation of Hollywood, or do I want to figure out how to work independently outside of the system that is so rampant with abuse and so unethical in so many ways? And there's no easy answers there, but you know, I think that certainly we need to move in a direction where communities have the ability to tell their own stories because they're more rich, they're richer, they're deeper. It leads to that syncretic world that I want. And then I think when it comes to like white filmmakers such as myself, you know, I mean, something that I'm personally really interested right now is just kind of like telling stories that deconstruct whiteness and and show the sort of ways in which we've upheld things that are incredibly problematic and dangerous. And so like that's certainly the route in which my storytelling is going moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It is definitely a place of tension, and I think that there is no it is not a clear answer, and it won't be, because it's going to differ for each person individually. And I think there are ways to play in both spaces. I mean, we are storytellers who build independently, and we build with like-minded people and tap into the resources and the people who are doing that work within the institutions, who are carrying that harder burden of trying to fix it from within. And I do believe that, as people who believe that there's no such thing as the voiceless, everybody has a voice, but it is our responsibility to give people a platform to amplify their voice. It is really so beautiful to see this collaboration between you two. I would love to close by asking Mohamad, for people who are watching, who are listening, who are in a similar place as you may have been, where they were forced to reckon with what home actually means in the rawest sense of the word. What guidance can you provide them for finding themselves again, for rebuilding again in art, especially when they are people who do not consider themselves creative?
I think what really helped me personally is embracing vulnerability. We built such a very thick steel armor around us, and while we're all troubled, might be inside with these, grappling with these issues that you've described. A lot of us tend to hide them. When I embraced that vulnerability and I started kind of facing it one-to-one, is when I allowed myself to say it's okay. It's okay to be broken. It's okay to have a broken house, and maybe that's قدر الله ما شاء فعل. But who knows? Maybe it's just destiny. Maybe it's the way it is, or maybe there's a greater reason for this pain. Now, I can answer from a Sufi standpoint, or I can answer from a normal, Joe standpoint.
Whatever rings truest to you right now.
The right response would be, we are not people of despair. We build, we move on, we stand up, and we move on, and we continue the journey. The journey might have ups and downs, but we have to keep an eye on the big picture, on the larger goal. I personally have found that spiritual growth and mindfulness and having a big picture of life and what is life about helped me answer a lot of the questions that I was grappling with in the moment of the Syrian, in the thickest moments of the Syrian war. Muslims call it qadar. A lot of faiths can speak to that inna ma'al usri yusra. Verily, with hardship comes ease. And so that helped me understand the bigger picture and helped me move along. Trust in your intuition, big time. Trust in your intuition. And even if you're not creative, find a way. Find a way. Creating can be anywhere from cooking to sculpting. Creating is so vast and is so giving. It's a tool that is so giving. And don't be afraid of failure. Not everything needs to be Instagram-worthy post or an award-winning sculpture. try, fail, try, fail. At any rate, if you end up throwing everything in the trash, you've just experienced a very therapeutic process.
Wow. Shukran, ya Mohammed. Thank you, Jimmy. This is so lovely to talk to you both, and I wish you so much peace.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.